You're listening to the Vint Wine Podcast, where you'll hear interviews and stories from around the wine world. From writers and critics to winemakers and sommeliers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping wine culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Wine Podcast, a production of the Vint Marketplace, your source for the top wines and spirits of the world at vintmarketplace.com. As always, I'm joined by Billy Galanko, my trusty co-host. How you doing, Billy?
Doing well. We are going to be wrapping up here a series of winemaker interviews today with a great Pinot Noir producer from Sonoma. But this will be the last. There will be no 5 questions with a winemaker this Friday, is why I wanted to kick off with that before I forgot in our episode. But yeah, It's been a lot of great winemakers.
Yeah, Kosta Browne on the podcast today. And I didn't realize how extensive their portfolio was, which is, what was actually one of the rabbit holes that I got down as a result of this episode, just looking at all the different single vineyard wines and wines from even other appellations and other regions around the world. They're making wine in France, in Oregon as well, so it's cool.
Yeah. I had first gotten connected with Julian at our MW seminar in February, so it was really cool to have him on, and we'll get a little bit more into him before we dive into his interview. But for this week, let's just hop right into the news. So first up is the Entrepreneur news. As of recording, the 2024 Entrepreneur campaign is officially underway. I've had a couple of releases so far. It's interesting. They're starting to get them out there even ahead of the critic scores. So people don't even know what to do.
People are all in a frazzle. I don't like when Ponte Canet is releasing wine these days. I don't think you even need to worry about the critic scores. The value there is just so crazy. Yeah, just wines that are at least the past couple of vintages that I've been able to have. And then even some ones with a little bit of bottle age recently have been so good, way above their price point in my mind. I don't know if you need to wait for critic scores or snatch it up based on pricing. I guess the pricing is still good, but I know there's a lot of shakeup in the EP pricing landscape, right?
Yeah, I think there was a little news. I guess some people were expecting really big discounts from some producers. I think they were only down a little bit from last year, but last year was already a lot from the year before. So they came out. It's listed on the Vint Marketplace at $89 for a bottle, which is great value. And I will say there a few critic scores I think were about ready to go. So Wine Advocate published trying to keep up with these, and this wine was William Kelly's in his top 3 wines of the whole year. So that was really cool.
Yeah, in wine buying, you would be hard pressed to get better value out of $100 than Ponte Canet. So that's my slightly biased and also unbiased, because I have literally no stake in anything they're doing there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't know they were paying you now.
I know. But no, it's good stuff. Go to the Vint Marketplace and pick up 6 or 7 cases.
Yeah. So the top 3 from William Kelly were Ponte Canet, Chateau Cheval Blanc, and I can never say it. Conseillant. Yeah, La Conseillant. So cool. Nice. So everybody stay tuned. We're going to be continuing to have our releases on the Vint Marketplace as wines are released across Bordeaux. And looking forward to an exciting campaign that will stretch all of May most likely. And last year it even trickled into June. So hold on.
I just wanted to throw out there too. You said Chateau Cheval Blanc. Those are $500 a bottle. So
yeah, comparatively, both of those are a lot more expensive. Yeah. We don't know what the release price for the 2024 Cheval Blanc, to be clear, is, but on average, that's what those bottles go for. So great relative value here. The second
blind taste too. It's a good blind taste between.
What do you mean? To identify.
Buy a case of both and see if it actually is good value.
They're very different wines. It's neither. You'd be able to identify them in a blind taste. It would be a good exercise for that. I agree with that. Cool. So the second topic I want to talk about today is the drinks business. They did their Champagne Masters a little while back, and they came out with an article that just titled "The Best Brut Non-Vintage Champagnes of 2025." And this actually got me thinking. So they had this list was their gold medal winners from 30 pounds to 75 pounds. So, roughly like $50 to $100. But it got me thinking, what are some of your favorite non-vintage brut champagnes? Brady, just in general, what are 2 of your favorite non-vintage champagnes?
Yeah, when you're trying to, especially with the pricing sort of parameters, I'm thinking like a bottle, especially here in the States, that you can run into a decently stocked wine shop or even Total Wine or your favorite online retailer and grab a bottle, and you know you're going to get the same thing every time. I got to go Ruinart. Their Blanc de Blanc Brut would be my pick from Champagne. I also asked Billy if I could do another wine, and for me, it's an English sparkling. It's the Wiston Estate, Wiston, Brut non-vintage. Not a Blanc de Blanc, made from all three the traditional Champagne grapes, basically in equal proportion. So if you like some Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier in your sparkling, go for the English sparkling Wiston Brut, and then Ruinart's my Blanc de Blanc pick.
Nice. Yeah, I actually am throwing myself for a loop here because I didn't notice the price restrictions before. And the funny part, I think we've discussed this on the podcast before, but I don't know if it's still the case, but it used to be that in California, Ruinart was like $20 more than it was wherever you lived.
Yeah, we talked about that one time. I don't know. I think for us, at least where I live, it's one of those things where you could certainly walk in somewhere and find it for like high 70s, but you can also walk in and find it for in the 90s. That's for
you're hard pressed and like in store out here in California to find it in general. And if you do find it, it's always over $100, like the Blanc de Blanc,
wow.
Not vintage. Yeah. So that's annoying. So for my two, one of mine was going to be Krug, but I guess if you're doing that, you could just cover a whole bunch of great non-vintage sparkling cuvées. So if I was going to go to champagnes, I will go with Bollinger and Paul Roger.
Nice.
I think both of those are great. The Bollinger ones, is it Bollinger? I never know. But the Bollinger ones, they never really disappoint. They're always very consistent. And I find a little bit more depth and nuance than, say, something maybe when we're like a Moet, which I find to be a little bit more lean. We have a friend here who always brings Moet over. So a little bit more depth, a little bit more going on there. They're also a sponsor of the Institute of Master of Wine. So it seems every event we go to, there's some Bollinger around, which is always nice. And then I just think the Paul Roger label is just really cool looking.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that enhances my experience with the wine, but I always feel like it's a little more slick when I'm having it than maybe some of its peers at the same price point.
Yeah, you might be able to say that about the packaging of Ruinart too, with the little bulby glass and the wine skin, the paper wine skin packaging they put around it, whatever they call it, shell, I guess. Cool. The last Paul Roger I actually had was at a tasting in New York, and I was quickly trying to find the picture on my phone. I'm pretty sure it was a 96. That was like the highlight of the night. Well, we had that and something late 90s Salon as well, and they were both crazy. Those were like bucket list wines I never even imagined that maybe I would get to taste without buying it myself, and so it was cool.
Yeah, that's crazy. I actually, speaking of Salon, I saw a post. It was a post of a post. It was like getting meta here of somebody talking about drinking Salon as the like first class airplane wine. I think it's Japanese Airways. Have you ever, I think that's a waste. Have you ever heard that you taste differently at altitude?
I don't. Yeah, I don't think I want to be drinking $1,700 champagne like on a plane, whether I'm first class or not. It just doesn't seem enjoyable to me. But I pulled up the Wiston, the English sparkling website for their Brut non-vintage that I was just describing. And actually in their 2-sentence description, it says, currently being poured on British Airways business class. So I guess it's a big deal to be the preferred champagne of an airline.
Yeah, well, I actually know what that is. And then, so the one that I was thinking of is a Japanese airline does serve 2013 Salon as of last year. But then they also serve B-Cart Semon, the Louis Semon bottling as well, depending on which route you're on. So that's interesting.
So Salon for me is, I don't know, maybe everyone has this wine where they really never had it before. Like I said, I've only had it once, like half a glass. And they really never had it before, but just hold it up as this is the best thing. It has to be. Like, just the brand really appeals to me. All of that. Totally caught up in it. And so Salon is like if I had unlimited money, I would just have cases of Salon. That's my, I just think they're so cool.
Yeah. No,
They're also so expensive. $1,000 a bottle, I think. is what they
Yeah,
typically
but
run.
they only produce one wine and they only produce it in the best years, and there was only like 46 total vintages ever produced or something. So it's just fun. There's a lot of novelty around it. This one, an article came out in March 18 this year, it says the 44 vintages of Ceylon from 1905 to 2013. So it's just funny. It makes it feel special. I agree. I would like to have some personally. Anybody out there, Ceylon, do you want to send us a bottle? Come on the podcast.
Hey, there you go.
Let us know.
Yeah, the last time I saw it in store near me, it was just like sitting in OWC on the shelf in a wine shop in 15 minutes from my house. It was a 3-bottle case and it was like $3,000 or whatever. And I was like, if I'm spending that money on this wine, it's not going to be sitting like in the middle of a wine shop out in the open, 76 degrees or whatever it was in there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, all right. Well, speaking of wines that are made with Pinot Noir, and also they make some Chardonnay, let's transition over to our interview with Julien Howsepian, lead winemaker at Kosta Browne. It was really cool. Like I mentioned, he did a really interesting talk for us at the MW seminar where we tasted a number of his wines that were fermented in different vessels. So fermented in wood, fermented in concrete, and fermented in steel. And then we also went through a couple that were aged in a few of those vessels. So it was really cool to just dive into the nuances of each vessel imparting not flavors, but a profile to the wine. And then even just that was with just one wine that we were walking through. And then taking a step back, they also tasted us on a couple wines from different single vineyards and just touched on the breadth of their portfolio. But like you said, as we got into it, I actually wasn't aware of all the wines they produced, especially the Santa Lucia Highlands ones. Had no idea those were there. So I'm tempted to do my own little horizontal of Kosta Browne wines.
Sonoma Coast, Santa Rita Hills, all the way up to Anderson Valley, basically covering the whole state. I'm just looking at the map on their site now. I just pulled it up. Covering the whole state. Yeah.
And up to the Willamette in Oregon. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Then they call their Appellation series, their single vineyard series. And they're like estate wines. They've got their wine from Burgundy. And yeah, I think really if you are a Pinot Noir head, it's a portfolio worth digging into.
Yep, I agree. And then the other part of that is being a Pinot Noir head, you really want to look for the wine expressing itself in different ways of the grape variety. And they're really about making sure they're amplifying how each wine expresses the place that it's from. So they might not be all made exactly the same way, but they're made in a way that enhances the distinctiveness of each vineyard. So I thought that was really cool to learn about as well.
Yeah, when the house style of your estate is basically making wines of place and then making wines from every place that is suitable for your grape is cool. Not every place, the ones that matter to Californians for sure. So yeah, it was a great, having Julian on was eye-opening in a lot of different ways. And like I said, sent me down a rabbit hole learning about the different sites that they produce in.
For sure. Shall we get into our interview?
Sure. Yep. Check out our online wine and spirit store at vintmarketplace.com. Pick up some of that great value Pontet Canet or the Cheval Blanc. You can find all of the Bordeaux that you're looking for, cult classics, all the way to Barolo, as well as niche producers that your favorite somms are drinking. We have one of the largest selections of inventory in the U.S. and some of the most competitive pricing for enthusiasts and collectors. The Vint Marketplace is your go-to shop for stocking your wine cellar. And now, without further ado, here is Julien Howsepian of Kosta Browne.
Hey, Julian, thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah, after listening to you at our seminar, the MW seminar stage 1, it was so interesting to hear the different aspects of what the different vessels Kosta Browne is working with, and just basically all the really interesting efforts going on at Kosta Browne. So we're really excited to have you on the podcast today. Can you share a little bit about maybe who you are and how you got into wine, and then we'll dive into a little more about what you're doing at Kosta Browne?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a born and raised California kid. I grew up in the East Bay outside of San Francisco. And after high school, I went to UC Davis. But the reality is I went there as an undeclared major, and I was going the econ route, but found myself in a sea of other people, and I was doing okay, but not necessarily loving it. And a friend of mine at the time was in the viticulture and enology department. And he introduced me to the concept that one could study how to grow grapes and make wine. And that was surprising to say the least at the time. As an 18, 19-year-old kid, I was like, you can go to school to learn how to make wine? What? That sounds cool. And he also informed me that it was one of the world's best programs in viticulture and enology, much Harvard Law might be. And so I decided at the time to basically take a chance and take a risk. I had an idea, a concept in my head that it was really important to graduate with a degree, but unless you were doing something very specialized, for example, you wanted to be a doctor or go into law school or something, there was a lot of other majors that could provide opportunities in life that didn't necessarily correlate with the degree, right? But the degree itself was important. So I decided that I would take a chance and do the viticulture and enology program. And much to my liking, the program was extremely difficult, but after my first year of studying, I worked an internship at Vineyards in Livermore, and I really, really liked it. So that was really what hooked me into the career path. And since then, worked through the university, graduated with the degree in viticulture and enology, a mouthful sometimes. And that's what really set me on track to ultimately become a winemaker.
We haven't had too many folks talk about the experience at Davis in that program. Maybe before we get into some of the other stuff, you can talk a little bit about what that was like. Obviously, going into it, not expecting, it's not like you were 12 years old and I'm going to be a winemaker. I'm going to go to this program. You found yourself there and decided to, like you said, take that risk. What kind of a grind is it? I assume it's not like your typical 4-year college undergrad experience. It's probably a little bit more intense.
Yeah, it was interesting. So the program at the time was broken up, in my view, into 3 different groups of people. You had the undergraduates who were the people that you just described, who maybe came from the industry, whose parents were in the industry, and they knew that was what they wanted to do, and they came in with a lot of experience. And so they had a little bit more background leading into the program. And then you had the graduate students, who obviously were very focused, had already had an undergraduate degree, and were there maybe after working in the industry for a number of years, and were very, very focused on learning and tying and connecting things together. And then the third category was my people like myself, who honestly didn't really know anything going into it. And so I remember vividly in one of our classes, first couple of days, walking through the very simple process flow chart of what a harvest wine looks like in terms of the fruit. And I remember it was like the fruit goes through the hopper, and then it goes through a destemmer, and then it goes through an auger, and it gets delivered to the tank, and people were moving on. And I was like, what's a hopper? And so for some, it was like, okay, this is really boring. And for others, it was like, this is really new. And so it was intense in that sense, because I had to do a lot of scraping and clawing to stay at the pace of the rest of the student class. And that was the more specific winemaking stuff. On the other end, which was really the introduction and the precursors to all those winemaking classes, were the science and math prerequisites, right? So all the general chemistry, biology, physics, biochemistry, organic chemistry, were calculus. You had to work through all of that before you could start taking some of the upper division classes. And those classes are hard. And yeah, it's a struggle. I remember my biochemistry class, I barely passed, and I was so pleased because there's only so much one's brain can absorb and understand. And I had reached my limit at that point. And I knew that my brain was only so squishy. And I was thankful to learn later in my career that that degree of knowledge is not necessarily required, right? So they really push you to see how far you could understand concepts. And then, of course, much of that was applied to grape growing and winemaking, but not quite as detailed and not necessarily as applicable, right, on the job itself, but certainly can give you a leg up. Yeah, it was a very, very difficult program to go through, but of course, a tremendous amount of information and an incredible foundation. And I think the program at the time, especially, and perhaps still to this day, was geared and focused towards more commercial winemaking, which is, of course, the vast majority of the wine that's consumed, produced on the shelves. And I have found an incredible niche at Kosta Browne that is more of an artisanal craft. So I have the advantage of understanding the winemaking at a deeper level, but also being able to apply a more of an artistic approach that actually goes against the grain of what I was taught in many ways. And the result is something a little bit more unique.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that they probably aren't able to cover a ton is just the operations that become a part of the job when you graduate into a head winemaker role and you're overseeing maybe parts of the vineyard management. You're overseeing other folks who are working with you, making the wine, tending to everything daily that needs to be tended to. That's a pretty, I would imagine, a pretty significant adjustment, right? Thinking about it as maybe, okay, I'm doing some chemistry, it's an art, but then there's a huge sort of human capital component to running that type of operation. Know what that was like transitioning into a head winemaker role later on, sort of how you came into that.
It's interesting. Logistics, right? And that's what we're talking about here. It's not something that you can cover. It takes quite a bit of effort to cover and understand logistics. And that's organizing people, organizing a process, making things efficient, which are all important components of a successful business. And that is a really, really challenging part of the wine business. And it's often overlooked. And for me, to be honest, I had an incredible opportunity maybe about 10 years ago that I was sent to, of all places, Pennsylvania to shadow an efficiency consultant at the Samuel Adams Brewery. And at first, we really didn't know why we were going out there, and it was more of like a savor to just go out there and just see what you can learn. The owner of the company at the time was a partner in this consultation business. And day one, we were like, okay, this is strange. Day two, we started to see what was happening in terms of the process that Samuel Adams is going through. And by the way, this was a process that they had been working on for months and months and months, but we had just had an opportunity to check it out for a week. And by day three, I was all in, and I was so incredibly surprised and really just, I realized that it was an interesting part of my role that I had no skill in how to untangle a process, understand each component, and put it back together in a way more organized fashion, and how to get the buy-in at the same time, right? Because the process involves actually asking the workers, what is the best way to do this task? And how do you avoid downtime? And breaking down the steps into very simple pieces and then putting it back together. And of course, you have the guardrails of the management or the winemaker, in my case, who a cellar worker might say, you know what? This job would be a lot easier if I didn't have to clean it up before and after every time I use it. And you're like, well, we still need to maintain the quality control of the sanitation process, but what about the order? Or what about, and they have so many incredible ideas, because when you're doing it over and over again, you're thinking to yourself of more efficient ways of doing it and creating a culture where those ideas can be shared and discussed and collaborating on the best, most efficient path forward was a huge breakthrough in my career. And I really embodied that ever since. And if you come to the winery today, you would see a lot of lines on the ground to help guide people where to go, where to store equipment, a lot of simple processes and we call it standard work, not really an SOP, but standard work to help the process go smoothly and how to teach people how to do their jobs.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Because could you explain a little bit of maybe very specific examples of like how that pertains to wine? Because there are so many aspects, whether it be in harvest or other times where like timing and efficiency is of the utmost crucialness.
Mm-hmm. It can range from simple things like we have little laminated tags that are either red, green, or white that we apply to tanks that have been to identify what stage of the sanitation process the tank is in. So that way we know that the last time that this tank has been cleaned, if it has a red tag on it, it's been last cleaned by caustic. We need to finish the process with our peracetic acid and water. And so I can look down a bay during harvest and I can look and visually see 20 tanks with white tags on them. And that means I don't have to go searching for my cellar master or call on the radio. Is tank number 17 ready to go? I see it. It's got a white tag on it and it eliminates a little bit of communication time. Things like where to put our fruit bins when they come into the winery to stage them for processing. And what we also do is, for example, our tanks are small. We're talking 3 to 8 ton tanks. So that's sometimes 6 bins, sometimes 15 bins. And you can stack those all up in a row. You could put 3 or 4 tanks in a row to stage for processing. And they all the bins look the same. They have different numbers on them. They all have KB on them. And it's really easy to make a mistake in terms of what bin you're grabbing or where a tank ends and where the next one begins. And so we put cones in front of and in between each set of stacks, right? So you have a stack of 7 with the red cone with the number 2 on it. And then behind that one is the yellow cone. Behind that one is the blue cone, all with different numbers. A person like myself, I can go downstairs. I can see exactly at what stage of the process we're in. I can see the order that we're going in. And then we also have a corresponding cone in front of the tanks that those bins are going to get processed into. That way, the seller, without needing to be notified verbally, someone, for example, is responsible for barreling down a tank. They say, okay, I want to go into bay 2. I see there's a yellow cone and a blue cone. That means that we're going to be driving through here the next 20 or 30 minutes to fill these tanks. And I need to stay out of their way because time and time again, our process was full of gridlock because we weren't able to communicate what each other were doing. And so the barrel driver, for example, would lay down 25 barrels for a barrel down. We'd be barreling down in the middle of it. And then the fruit processing team comes around the corner and they're like, oh my gosh, like they have a bin full of destemmed fruit. The line is moving, but everything has to stop. Right. So it's that type of visual cues that really, really help keep the process moving smoothly. And of course, harvest is crazy and it's long days. So we have a lot of fun, but I'd rather go home on the 12-hour mark than the 15-hour mark and eliminate a lot of the waste.
For sure. And then you guys, I think this is a good time we can talk about maybe some of the different wines you guys make at Kosta Browne, because you guys do a lot of small, either like single vineyard or even like some single block fermentation. So getting these right is very important. And it's also part of like the whole house style and the ethos of how you do things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. At a very basic level, small mistakes, they don't happen often. I can count on one hand how many times I've seen the wrong bin of fruit go into the wrong tank in my 13 years at Kosta Browne. But it's a pretty significant mistake if it happens with the wrong fruit. Sometimes we only have 1 or 2 fermenters, and if a half-ton bin of the wrong fruit goes into the wrong tank, that could completely destroy your composition. Right. So now all of a sudden your 5 tons of single vineyard designate has a half a ton of something else, and now you're out of compliance. You can't even make that wine if you wanted to. It's a significant risk. And to your point, we have a lot of small tanks, and we're talking 3 tons to 8 tons, like I mentioned, a 3-ton fermenter processing at 8 to 10 tons per hour. You'll fill that up in 25 minutes. And then the next tank is coming right after that. So it's important that we're very organized and things are being done properly, because on busy days at the peak of harvest, we might fill up 12 to 15 tanks. It's really important that things are organized.
When you think about the sort of how you've organized a portfolio of wines and like maybe some of the business decisions and also just like winemaking decisions that went into putting together your current portfolio and the wines that you produce year to year, what are maybe some unique things that you guys have the ability to do at Kosta Browne, styles that you're able to produce, expressions you're able to get from your different blocks? Maybe walk through a few of your favorite of those wines and maybe tell that story a little bit.
Yeah. So Kosta Browne, we started in 1997 and we're located in the Russian River Valley, right? We're in Sebastopol, California. And that was our home base for the first several years as Dan, Costa, and Michael Brown were launching their business. But it didn't take long before we were introduced to the Santa Lucia Highlands. And the Pinzoni family and the Francione family, we created a partnership with them that's still in partnership today. We're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year working together. But we found our single vineyard wines for the first 10 to 15 years. That was a really beautiful collection of vineyards from Sonoma Coast, Russian River, and Santa Lucia Highlands. And we also made appellation blends from each of those regions. And then in 2016, there was a new idea that said, well, why would we constrain ourselves to the Russian River Valley, Sonoma Coast, Santa Lucia Highlands, where there's emerging regions that are really exciting for Pinot Noir? Because we were really obsessed with making distinctive wines. And so that year, we actually decided to start sourcing grapes from Santa Rita Hills, as well as Anderson Valley. And so in the same year, we stretched our territory north and south of Russian River Valley and took on, a number of different vineyards and started making single vineyards and appellation wines from each of those regions as well. And then, of course, we continued with that thread in 2020 and 2021, where we started making wines in Burgundy in 2020 from a number of different villages and premier crus. And then in 21, Willamette Valley, Oregon. So in terms of the portfolio and the scope of what we're offering, what we have learned over the years is that our members get really excited and they're really interested in new wines. We find an incredible positive response to being with the opportunity to purchase a new wine. So we've tried to provide something exciting and new to our customers and members from time to time. And it is unique. We do have an incredible membership, a group of loyal people that are willing to support us on this mission. And all of the grapes from California, from Santa Rita Hills to Anderson Valley, they all come to the winery. We all pick most of the grapes, especially in Santa Rita, which is a 6-hour drive from Sebastopol, are picked very early in the morning, sometimes starting at 11 o'clock at night. They're on the truck by 4 or 5 in the morning, and they arrive to the winery 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And we're able to process those grapes in an effective way that is not compromised by the fact that the grapes travel such a long distance. And the same is true for all of the grapes in California. The grapes in Oregon, they are produced at a facility in Oregon, because if those grapes were to cross the border between Oregon and California, they would lose their designation of Willamette Valley or the whatever sub-AVA we might want to appellate as. So those are made up there. And for me, it's actually really easy. There's an airport in Santa Rosa. It flies to Portland. It's a very easy trip to get up there and down and back. Sometimes I can be there for one night and get a lot done. And so when you look at the whole offering, we have a lot of really interesting wines. We make basically 7 different regional blends, mostly Pinot Noir, 1 Russian River Chardonnay, and they all are very different from one another. We make the wines in a very, I would say, simple way, in the sense that we're not trying to do a lot to manipulate the character of the wine. So when you get a chance to taste all the different regions, you really get a really beautiful, clear view of what each appellation does, right? Pinot Noir is the ultimate expression of terroir and climate. And so, to be able to view all of the regions, the major regions for Pinot Noir in California under one producer, that's a really consistent and clear way to evaluate what different regions are doing and what type of wines they produce. And then to get more granular, we make single vineyards in every region that we produce wines from. So we've got a really excellent offering from each of those appellations. And every year it's tough to call out favorites and some of my favorite wines. Every year is always a little different. I think that's what's neat is one year, one vineyard might really surprise you. And another, I have Gap's Crown, I would say, from the Sonoma coast. That's probably consistently one of my top wines. It just is so approachable. It's got tons of beautiful fruit, tons of depth. That was the wine that we shared, Billy, at the MW presentation. It's a wine that I think is dynamic in the sense that it can attract, I think, someone who isn't necessarily familiar with quality wines. If they were to taste a Kosta Browne Gap's Crown, it would be an immediate recognition that this is something different. And this is a really nice wine. And the wine's not only made well, but it comes from a unique place, and there's a distinction about that wine. I think it's also a wine that has enough depth, concentration, and strength that it can captivate maybe someone who hasn't yet bought in and fallen in love with Pinot Noir. And we had plenty of people over the years that say, I don't drink Pinot Noir. I like to drink wines from Napa Valley, which is all good. And they say, well, why don't you try this wine? And they're like, whoa, this is cool. This is a Pinot Noir. And I said, yes, it's a Pinot Noir. And they're like, now this is something I can get behind. It has the ability to attract new consumers. And I also think it's a wine that is of high quality that any Pinot Noir enthusiast can appreciate, whether or not they're a California fan, for example. They're going to taste it and there's going to be something to appreciate in that wine no matter what. I think it reaches all the different people, which I love. In terms of maybe the wine I think is the highest quality that we produce in terms of the really, really high end is Treehouse Vineyard, which is in Green Valley, Russian River Valley. It's part of our state program. And Treehouse Vineyard is not only a absolutely breathtaking, just beautiful spot in Russian River Valley and unique. You get up there, it's a 360-degree view. It's at the top of a little knoll on a ridge line, and the soil is bright red. It's farmed like none other. Charlie Chenoweth does an incredible job with that place. Everything is so meticulous, but the wine is so vibrant. It's deep, but it's light. It's fresh. It's got tons of acidity, natural acidity. It's got a lot of concentration. And my favorite part is that it's always a really easy wine to make. There's no frills. It just happens. And that is a true testament to the site. Of course, we're trying to transfer and allow the greatest potential of any wine, but this one just does it effortlessly. And I love that. And it's a wine that when I'm tasting it with members, partners in the trade, whether they are industry visitors, troopers, or other people, this is the wine that they turn their head and they go, what is this? This is remarkable. And I get the same reaction. I even had it just the other day. We were tasting with some of our Coopers, and the Treehouse wine at the end was like, they're like, this is the most incredible wine I've had in a long time. And you're like, that's Treehouse. So I love Treehouse. Gosh, down in Santa Rita, the wines are really interesting. They're very different. Rita's Crown, we've worked with for a long time, as well as Mount Carmel. They both share a fence line, totally different wines. They have much different elevations, but very interesting to taste two wines that are literally grown right next to each other because they're just so incredibly different. And then, of course, in Santa Lucia Highlands, we got the trifecta of Rosellas, Gary's, and Pisoni. There are three iconic vineyards. Again, each of those are very different. And I love the different expressions. Each of these places has a unique climate, and the Santa Lucia Highlands climate is fascinating. You know, you have all this fog and cool energy coming in from the Monterey Bay. It's sweeping in and out of the Appalachian, kind of in a southeast to northwest direction on every morning, every evening. And you got these beautiful alluvial fans that are lifted up off of the valley floor. That's sediment from the Santa Lucia mountain range, with these deep crevasses, these deep terraces that have been cut out over the thousands of years from water running off of the mountains. And the soil has changed rather dramatically as you go further south. And each of those are from a plusher style, rounder, softer, more elegant Rosellas vineyard, all the way further south to Pisoni, which is a much rockier, a lot more thinner soils and a little bit more texture. So there's a lot of good wines that we're producing, and they're all unique. And I think it's a wonderful portfolio to explore if you love Pinot Noir, especially.
Yeah, they sound amazing. And the ones I've had are obviously very good as well. For just a high level for our listeners, can you just say what, I guess, generally you could expect from a Santa Rita Pinot Noir versus the Santa Lucia Highlands versus a Russian River? Just like high level ballpark. I know they're very site to site and everything, but.
Correct. Santa Rita is the coolest grape growing region in California. It's really close to the Pacific Ocean. It's further south, but it's got no real hills or any obstruction from the coast. So you have a lot of windy and cool days. And the wines are a little bit brighter, a little bit more acidic, but they also have really long hang time. So you actually have quite a bit of depth and concentration on the wines, but they're grown in a cooler, more vibrant environment. So therefore the wines tend to be like that. Santa Lucia Highlands, those wines to me have a little bit more of I always get like a little bit more of an orange zest, an orange kind of citrus element to those wines. Very nice. They're very deep. They're very round, very glossy wines. And then of course, when you get into Russian River is more of a very crystallized, very pure fruit and more of the red and black fruit character. But it's really about the purity of the fruit, which I think makes Russian River unique.
Touched on the fact that you guys are making wine from a bunch of different sites, right? And you're up in Oregon, you're in California, you're making wine from vineyards in France. When you had briefly mentioned that the style that you try and go for, something that's accessible to folks who are coming newly to Pinot Noir from maybe some other varieties that they have expressed that they're enjoying. But also imagine that you have stuff across your portfolio for Pinot Noir lovers, whether they've initially been maybe drinking more of an old world style and now just exploring California. Focusing on those three sort of high level pools of Pinot Noir, Oregon, California, maybe Burgundy. What can folks expect in terms of a benchmark for those regions in the Kosta Browne portfolio?
Yeah, I would say the Appalachian wines are always going to be a very true expression, right? And for our members, when you sign up to be a member at Kosta Browne, the Appalachian wines are going to be your first offer, right? So that's going to be your introduction to the brand. And as you work your way through the years, you get offered more and more different wines. Benchmark I would say Single Vineyards, again, like Gap's Crown, I think is a incredible wine that we've already reviewed. And Keefer Ranch is another Green Valley vineyard designate that we produce. It's actually on the more, not quite on the same road, but it's close to Treehouse, but couldn't be more different. It's a much more soft, supple, very smooth, pleasing, generous wine. That's been a wine that we've been producing for a very long time that is almost synonymous with Kosta Browne. And I would say for San Lucia, we're talking Gary's Vineyard. Gary's Vineyard is a partnership between Gary Francione and Gary Pisoni and those two families. And the wines are an expression of not only the place, but the Garys also. It's a very playful wine. I would say it's a little bit of a wider feeling. I sometimes describe it as a little bit like a jumbo jet. It's a wine that kind of is broad and wide and really, really enjoyable. And then we haven't talked much about Anderson Valley, but when you talk about Anderson Valley, those wines tend to be a little bit more rustic, more blue fruited, a little bit more earth. And our Cerise vineyard, Pinot Noir, is what I consider to be the black diamond of Pinot Noir in terms of one's ability to enjoy and attack and have fun with, right? It's not a wine that's going to jump out of your glass and give you a lot of fruit necessarily right away. It's a wine that you need to age more. It can be a little bit firm when it's young, but when it ages after 4 to 6 years, all those tannins come together and the secondary and tertiary flavors start to come around and the wine becomes really unique. It's very interesting, but it's not typical in terms of what we're producing in the rest of California. Willamette Valley, in fact, what's interesting is Anderson Valley and Willamette Valley are more similar to each other than the rest of California, right? So I consider Anderson Valley and Willamette Valley to be closer and more similar in style than Anderson Valley is to any of the rest of the Russian River wines or California wines. Definitely not as round and rich of a palate, a little bit firmer tannin, and a lot more kind of those earth and forest floor and mushroom aromas mixed in with some of the fruit. And we make a couple single vineyards from Willamette as well, Shea and Eola Springs. So, and then of course in Burgundy, we make a number of different wines there. Bon Premier Cru, Volnay, Nuit Saint-Georges, Pommard, Chablis Premier Cru. We've made a couple others over the years, but that's more or less our core offering. And I consider our signature blends there to be the Bon Premier Cru and Pommard. I love the Volnay as well, but the Bon Premier Cru, we use a little bit more whole cluster on that wine. Bon can be a playful, rounder, richer style wine in the context of Burgundy. And by adding a little bit of whole cluster, it gives it some tension and some structure, which I really think is an excellent pairing because I think it really elevates the overall quality and the ageability of the wine. Nuit Saint-Georges is a very interesting AOC. It depends on where you get the fruit from the north or the south. It's a much more savory. It's a really cool wine to have with dinner, or it's a fun profile to explore as well.
Very cool. Very cool. We are running a little low on time here, but very quickly, can you just talk about the impact in maybe 1 to 2 minutes? I know we did a whole seminar on this, but the impact of the different vessels that you use to mature these. So everybody knows there's single variety coming into the winery, but then you guys age them in different ways and vinify them. Can you just talk high level on how those impact the wines and your blending?
Yes. We have the luxury of being able to ferment in 3 different main vessel types: stainless steel, French oak, and concrete. And each of those vessels impact the wine in a different way. And for me, really what it comes down to is the fermentation kinetics with the wine. Stainless steel, it's jacketed on the outside with temperature control, and it's really easy to manipulate and change the temperature of the take. And also the material itself of stainless steel produces wines that are a little bit more about length and a little bit more rigid in terms of its structure. Whereas wood, it's very insulary. It gets hot real quick. The fermentations typically start quicker and earlier. So you have a different fermentation kinetics, but those wines get warm, and then we have to manage the temperature pretty aggressively in terms of keeping it cool. But you have a real slow, nice, gentle temperature drift at the end. And of course, wood adds structure and texture to the wines. Concrete, thick concrete. The fruit goes in cold, the concrete's cold. It takes a long time to warm up, and ultimately those wines ferment at lower temperatures. It takes a long time for them to cool off after the peak of fermentation. So you've got a really wide, slow arc. And those wines tend to be a little bit more delicate in the aromatics. It's a cool fermentation so that you retain more of the pretty aromatics. And each of those, obviously, you can put the same fruit in 2 or 3 of those different ones and get very, very, very different results. So we try to curtail each single vineyard, for example, or regional blend with the right vessels to help accentuate and lift whatever character we're trying to look at and highlight. So it's a neat thing that we get to play around with.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we'll have to have you back on sometime to really dive deep into that, because it was a fascinating talk you gave at the seminar. But well, Julian, that's been great. Thanks so much for joining us. We've learned a lot more than even I thought I could about Kosta Browne. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. That was our interview with Julien Howsepian. I hope everybody goes and checks out some Kosta Browne wines. I maybe suggest doing what I'm thinking about doing, is getting a horizontal and maybe tasting from regions across California, or maybe their Oregon and Burgundy bottling as well. Again, there will be no 5 questions with a winemaker on Friday, but we will be back with a full new episode next week. Cheers.